sometimes because material like that doesn't necessarily respect entirely some of the idiosyncrasies of a couple of the major monotheistic doctrines. People make the assumption upon listening to such material that I'm not religious myself, which is pretty spot on. But sort of beside the point. I don't want to be divisive, you know. And besides, I think you can be spiritual. I think you can have a deep sense of spirituality without actually adhering to any of the major religions. As it turns out, I'm not at all spiritual. I've just got this real sense of emptiness. But I believe in things, you know. I believe in rocks and gravity, and I have like a relativist morality, which I can manipulate to suit my worldview, so that I can justify group sex, for example, whilst abhorring group prayer. Works for me. But you have to admit, really, ironically, I guess, given all the religious violence in the world, one of the things that actually binds us all, that we all have in common across all cultures and indeed all time since the beginning of recorded thought, is this tendency to invoke the supernatural to help us explain those things in our lives which we find difficult to explain using only the evidence at hand, you know. A modern example of this, I saw on telly recently a show about, it was called, I think it was Miracles in the Womb, or Extreme Wombs, or something, Changing Wombs. It wasn't that. But anyway, it was about multiple births, and a woman had given birth to naturally conceived identical quadruplet girls, which is very rare. And she said, the doctors told me there was a 1 in 64 million chance that this could happen. It's a miracle! But, of course, as we know, it's not, because things that have a 1 in 64 million chance of happening happen all the time. To presume that your 1 in 64 million chance thing is a miracle is to significantly underestimate the total number of things that there are. Maths. It's interesting, actually, now that I live overseas. It struck me anew when I came back to Australia this time that here we seem, this compulsion towards the supernatural and the mystical seems to manifest itself mostly in Australia in the presence of bumper stickers. You know the ones I'm talking about? They're usually purple, and they generally imply the existence of a benevolent spirit of some sort looking after us all, and especially the people who bothered to put the sticker on their bumper. They say things like the goddess is dancing, and my favourite probably is don't drive faster than your angel can fly. As if of all the possible restrictions an angel might face, speed is the... Unless they're just proposing the possibility of the existence of unfit angels. And probably the one that annoys me most, because it's most common, I think, is, I'm sure you've all seen it, magic happens. Magic happens, they usually sparkle. I don't know what it is about magic happen stickers on cars, but every time I see one, I want to get out my permanent marker and sort of sneak over and write underneath it, so does cot death. Under which a spiritual person with their slightly more ephemeral marker might choose to write something like, yeah, but sometimes the magician has to do bad magic in order to, A, test our faith, or B, for the purpose of a greater good. Under which someone like me, with their permanent marker, might choose to write something along the lines of, fuck off. Thus ending an otherwise perfectly sensible bumper-based philosophical argument. I have a particular religious friend I go head-to-head with and get very boring at dinner parties with on these sort of big questions. And he always sort of seems to think that to be skeptical is to be cynical, and that my view of the world sees no beauty, which I always argue is not the case. I mean, I find the world a really exciting place. There are ideas that are a bit more sciencey, that are just as exciting as the kind of magic-y ones, you know, like one of the greatest ideas of all time, evolution, the theory of natural selection, you know. Not only is it, how would you say, right, I'm just practicing my timing for my American tour. Pause, right, and duck. Duck. I mean, not only is it good science, but it's also really thrilling, don't you think, this idea that an individual of a species can be born sort of mutated in a good way. And in the moment of that individual's birth, it holds within its genetic code the potential for its entire species to take a huge evolutionary leap forward. It's amazing. And I always think, what would life have been like being one of those individual mutant freaks? You know, what did the other kids think? Imagine being the first dude ever to have feet. I reckon that would be really tough. And also, what I wonder is, how did these individuals with their new bits, like, how did they figure out how to use them? Did they just stumble upon their potential purpose one day, just accidentally, you know? Imagine you're a fish, and you're just swimming in the ocean with your school, and you're all just hanging out, swimming, same as always, because you're fish. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Tony, fucking Tony, Tony just goes, I'm getting out. Yeah, I'm freezing. You're a fish, Tony. Yeah, well, I'm a cold fish. I just want to pop out for a bit, you know, maybe lie on my towel. Bring you an ice cream. Yeah, don't bother, Tony, you're a freak. Come on, school, let's go. Let's ostracize him for being different. Yeah, let's ostracize him. Tony's a freak. Let's ostracize him for being different. No, don't ostracize me. I'm just a little bit different. Oh, bugger you then. I'll show you guys. Fuck me. Those are going to come in handy. And imagine what Tony would think, standing there on his brand new feet, on the brink of the beginnings of mankind as we know it. If he could look forward just a few short hundreds of millions of years to see one of his descendants, an Israeli Jew by the name of Jesus, having a nail hammered through his feet. The very feet that Tony provided him with as a punishment for having a sort of schizophrenic discourse with a god who was created by man to explain the existence of feet in the absence of the knowledge of the existence of Tony. I think that would blow his little fishy mind. This religious friend of mine, arguments often end with him telling me that I'm not very open-minded. And because he's my friend and I respect him, I've written him a song. It's called, If You Open Your Mind Too Much, Your Brain Will Fall Out. Which I think is brilliant. It's so clever. Unfortunately, I didn't come up with it myself. I read that in a book. So to avoid copyright issues, I've given it a subtitle, which is, Take My Wife! If anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single psychic who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they are able to read minds, And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single astrologer who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they can predict future human events by interpreting celestial signs. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single homeopathic practitioner who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that solutions made up of infinitely tiny particles of good stuff dissolved repeatedly into relatively huge quantities of water have a consistently higher medicinal value than a similarly administered placebo. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single spiritual person who's been able to show either empirically or logically the existence of a higher power with any consciousness or interest in the human race, or ability to punish or reward humans for their moral choices, or that there is any reason other than fear to believe in any version of an afterlife, I will give you my piano, one of my legs, and my wife.